Welcome to Mental Health and Cybersecurity, What the Research Reveals. I'm Dr. Kashyap Demaraju, and in each episode, I talk with leading researchers to uncover how science can transform the resilience and well-being of the people who protect our digital world. My guest for World Mental Health Day 2025 is Kathryn DuPont. Kathryn is a seasoned business leader with a passion for unlocking performance, transforming cultures, and guiding people through meaningful change. With deep expertise in strategic planning, executive level communications, employee engagement, and organizational development and growth, she helps individuals and organizations thrive in complex, fast moving environments. Her work spans executive coaching and workplace performance, always with a focus on people at the center of strategy. She holds a Master of Arts in Executive and Organizational Coaching and a BA in Psychology with a focus on organizational behavior. She's a professional certified coach through the International Coaching Federation and a certified corporate director through the Institute of Corporate Directors of Canada. In this episode, we explored the growing mental health crisis within the cybersecurity workforce. Kathryn and I discuss her research on how coaching can help cybersecurity professionals manage burnout, build resilience, and sustain their performance in high-pressure roles. We talk about the alarming turnover rates among CISOs, why so many practitioners feel unsupported, and how organizational culture can either amplify or alleviate these challenges. Kathryn shares insights from her study comparing those who received coaching with those who did not, revealing the transformative impact of structured emotional support. We also touch on why traditional employee assistance programs often fall short, the critical need to process major incidents, and the importance of designing tailored interventions that truly meet the need of cybersecurity professionals. Let's dive into the conversation. Hi, Kathryn. Welcome to the interview series, Mental Health and Cybersecurity, What the Research Reveals. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be joining you. Thanks.
Awesome. I think we actually first spoke a few months back when I came across your master thesis titled From Burnout to Resilience, Executive Coaching as a Strategic Intervention in Cybersecurity Workforces. And as soon as I saw this, I was like, I need to speak to you. And luckily, you have your webpage. I booked an appointment with you, and I got to learn more about your research. And that's why we are also here today, so we can actually share what research you've done and the experiences that you've had with other people, so that we can start to make changes across organizations that deal with cybersecurity. So before we go into the thesis aspects and what we found, perhaps you could tell us what got you into cybersecurity, got you into the industry, and also about the coaching as well.
Sure, I'd love to. Thank you for having me here. So I started working in tech in the mid 90s and actually didn't know a lot about technology, but worked as a marketing professional. And my second job was working with a security company. And back then, way back then, um, it was all about VPNs. And so I went to work for a company that was interested in selling VPNs to all kinds of organizations. And that was my first foray into really meeting some fascinating people. People who sort of exuded this need to protect organizations and the need, therefore, to protect others. So throughout my career, I continued to work in marketing, but I ended up over the process primarily working with different kinds of cybersecurity companies. So I worked in from VPN, I went into working with to a multi-factor authentication. and then host intrusion prevention companies. And my point with that is kind of watching the industry expand and grow up. So it went from simple VPNs to all kinds of, virtualized environments and cloud and all of these things over time. And I ended up working with a very large corporation in the security services area, which gave me sort of a broader perspective to the ecosystem of security. But through it all, I have made incredible contact with people who work in all kinds of areas, from managed security to um, uh, breach investigation to pen testers, everybody across the board. And I've always admired how intelligent and how vigilant they are in taking care of organizations and therefore people. So it's always, I guess I could say that it's always been profoundly interesting to me and important to me, as I know that these people really are dedicated, much like first responders, to the protection of our lives. The coaching part came up more recently. I originally also did a degree in organizational behavior with the intention of doing a PhD, but life got in the way, and it's a good way. But I ended up just working and not completing that PhD. Um, I've always also been very fascinated with how people interact in the workplace. So a few years ago, someone said to me, you have a tendency to really work with people that are struggling in the workplace. Have you thought about coaching? And I said, well, what is coaching? Is it like therapy? And some people said, well, it's a little bit like therapy. So I investigated and realized that it was sort of a full circle about coming back to the whole organizational behavior aspect that really interested me earlier in my career. So I started training and really loved it, and started working with people, and enjoyed the aspect of helping people get unstuck in their troubles at work. I'm not a life coach, although life and work really do overlap. My job, I feel, is to help people with their struggles with whether it's their managers, whether it's communication, whether it's teams, really helping them to develop strategies around getting through the struggles they're having. So when the time came to do this master's degree in coaching, that's really what it was. I thought, wow, what inspires me? What do I care about? And it was an epiphanal moment of, I know all of these people who work in such a stressful environment. And wouldn't it be interesting to find out if coaching has an impact on whether or not these people can deal with these frenetic environments? And that's generalizing. But the idea being that, is there help that can be given through executive coaching to people in the workplace?
Amazing, amazing. So, yeah, from what you said, you definitely have like this range of experience, and it's also far-reaching. And you've seen how the industry has evolved over the years. And I think it's really nice that you have the coaching aspect as well, and also that you put the two together, like, okay, let's say coaching, and then how does it impact people, or how can we use that within the cybersecurity workforce?
Yeah.
That sort of touches upon the motivation for your master thesis. Could
Yeah.
you say a little more about the thesis? Like, what were the goals of your study? You said you put the
Mhm.
two together. um, did you have any specific goals or like questions that came to your mind when you started thinking about that, and what made you choose those questions in some sense?
Thank you. Well, so where it really began was, of course, being in the cybersecurity industry multiple times over the past 20, 25 years, was I've always stayed in touch with people, and I've always kind of followed along the media, what the media says, what analysts are saying, because I've established those relationships as well. But what I found was there was a study done in, I think it was 2019, by Nomnet Security, and it was quite alarming. And it was a study of CISOs that was taken across, I think, all the multinationals, with a employee population of 5,000. I'm not sure, so don't quote me on that. But it was heartbreaking and eye-opening all at the same time. What they were stating back then was that the average tenure of a CISO in the study was 26 months in the job. And my eyes just popped out of my head when I saw that, because it was like, well, if that's the kind of churn we're experiencing, what's going on here? And why is this happening? And are these people not getting help? But included in that study were other pieces of evidence around mental health, people who were getting addicted to alcohol and drugs, family breakdowns, and it was just shocking to me. And so if people are turning over that quickly in their jobs, then how do we, are we safe as a human race? And I think that's an existential question, but it's, we are not working on, we're doing a disservice to these people if we're not taking care of their mental health and they're feeling like they have to leave. So then another study came out by Vectra, which said something similar. And it was like, again, it was just kind of this moment of, oh, wow, there's something going on here. So that was sort of the impetus. And I quote those studies in my thesis that, tell us that there's really something not great going on for these people. Not that they don't love their jobs. And that's what my study revealed, is most people go into this really excited and want to do good in the world. They have a sense of duty or a duty of service, most of them. So that's why they go into this. They want to protect people. They want to help people, but are they being helped? That's the question.
Yeah, I think that's such an important point because I've also seen some research, and in the research that I've done as well, we see that many of the people working in the workforce do have the sense of meaning and purpose and duty, and they find the work to be meaningful. But at the same time, many of them do experience a lot of stress, a lot of exhaustion, and which results in burnout.
Yeah.
And I also recall the Nominate 20, I think, yeah, the Nominate study that you're referring to. And for me, what stood out was that number, like, I don't know, 90% or 95, 91% of all CISOs surveyed reported to be stressed out or really stressed or scored very high on stress levels. And I think those are the kind of questions, or those are stats that start making us question what is going on over here. And I think that's also one of the reasons that we're having this discussion today, is to bring about this awareness and find out what we can do. And we can see, at least from your discussion, there are potential strategies and interventions that help people to go about that. So, could you tell us a little more? Like, you mentioned there was some motivating evidence
Mhm.
to get you into this. Were there any other maybe gaps in the literature or something else that motivated you further to, particularly you look at coaching in your
The,
study?
yeah. Well, so there were a few articles that were out there, and fortunately, I was able to recruit one of the leaders in this area to be on my thesis committee, which is wonderful. His name is Dr. Calvin Nobles, and he works with other researchers in this area. But Calvin is based out of the University of Maryland, and he, I believe, runs the Cybersecurity Institute there. He's one of the lead senior level head, I guess he's the head of, yeah, he's the head of the Cybersecurity Institute. Sorry. I don't know his formal title at this moment in my mind. But anyway, Calvin gladly came on as the committee member, but he had done a lot of research in what's called human factors. And it's the same principles that they use in engineering. What are the human factors associated with cybersecurity, working in cybersecurity? I mean, it's not just tools and technology. It's also the cognitive and emotional factors that are critical in how people respond, particularly in an incident. But it's also, in the cybersecurity world, we talk about left of boom, right? What happens before the bad stuff happens? And it's a multitude of things. It's team dynamics. It's organizational culture. It's leadership support. It's, again, having those resiliency strategies that, God help you, if the boom happens, how you handle it, right? And so Calvin had a lot of research, and others that had co-authored with him and even individually authored had done some work into the area, again, of human factors, but nothing that sort of tied coaching, again, the sort of hopefully the antidote to burnout, or the supporter of resilience, I call it. Was there anything about that? And so I couldn't find much. But again, remember, this as a researcher, you find what you find, right? And, you try to make sure no stone is unturned, but there's only so much you can do. You just kind of have to hit the ground running and start doing the research. But yeah, so for me, this degree that I just did is all about, it's coaching. So my degree is in executive and organizational coaching. So was there literature about that in my field? No. But there's a lot of work in the area of emergency responders, as well as particularly healthcare. There's a lot of evidence there around the efficacy of coaching in terms of serving burnout, for sure. There's lots there.
I see. Interesting. Okay, I
Yeah.
wasn't aware of that. I agree with you on the fact that, and actually I've heard this also from some other people as well, in other sectors like aviation or law
Mhm.
enforcement, um, in emergency rooms, or in the medical field. They have some kind of psychological support when
Yeah.
something happens. However, it's not so common, or it seems like, or it's not even thought of, that people who work in cybersecurity, especially like the frontline defenders, they might actually need such support, and coaching could be one of those aspects, or some kind of therapy, or some kind of safe space for them to talk about it, and
Mhm.
that the person who they're speaking to also gets the context. And I think that's something really important.
Yeah.
So how did you go about finding people, or like recruiting people for your study? And maybe you can tell us a little bit, like introduce like the idea you had for your study. What was how did you design it? What did you want to
Yeah.
actually study? Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Such a loaded question. Well, so at one point during the study, when I told my committee that I had managed to recruit 21 people into the study, my Calvin actually said, "Are you kidding me? How did you do that?" Because cybersecurity people are busy. And I was asking, with the methodology and the way I tested, I was asking for people to give up 90 minutes of their time. And even that was a big ask for people who work in the industry. But I managed to attract 21 people to the study. And I did it through a number of means. Again, because I had this really wonderful background and a lot of contacts in the industry. The first thing I did was I reached out to my friends and said, please help me get people into the study. And so my friends rose to the occasion, and they let people know that the study was available. And, I got a lot of great response. And one of the questions, which was great, I was able to ask in my one-on-one interviews is, what brought you here? And the good thing that, again, made my heart warm and very happy was that people all said, everybody in the study said, this is important. This is an important study. And that just sort of validated everything, because regardless of whether they had received coaching or they had not received coaching, they all believed that they needed support. And that was so important. So almost makes me want to cry. Um, but anyway, so how did I go about it? I reached out to my friend group. I put posts up on LinkedIn. I put up blogs. I think I did a goofy little video and said, hey, help me. Um, I had family, even, I have family members who have worked in corporate life who knew cybersecurity folks. So it was a multitude, sort of spread all the tentacles and see who comes in. But I did have a criteria. I wanted to make sure that people had been in the industry for a while. That was both an advantage and a limitation in the study, which we can talk about in a bit. I probably should have kept it, because I had people in this study who had been in cyber for 35 years. And so you can imagine there's a significant difference between 7 years or fewer years and 35 years in terms of cynicism and jadedness, perhaps,
Yeah.
and also experiences. So that if I could ever go back and do it again, I probably would have narrowed that experience level a little bit.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
So would you have then limited from which side? So you would have lesser experience
No, I
compared
probably
to.
would have gone with more like 10 to 15 years
Okay.
experience, maybe that
Hmm.
pocket, right? Because that is a group. Well, yeah, I guess you could have done even slivers, right? You could have done
Hmm.
several groups. I didn't think
Yeah.
to do that. I just was so excited to have people in the industry in the study. But this was also not a longitudinal study. It was only a year. So, ideally you would set up a study where you have slivers of people in certain roles. That's another thing. I accepted people. They had to have worked in cybersecurity in one way or another. So whether it was pen testing, SOC analyst, could be people who were consulting, even, because a lot of people who work as consultants in cyber have multiple clients that they're serving. Vulnerability management, anything that, again, is in the ecosystem of cybersecurity. So I also would, if I did it again, I would probably go back and limit it to a specific area. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Absolutely. And what could you say? What was the goal of the study or the goals of the study? What were you trying?
Sure.
What did you want to do with the people who agreed to participate?
So what the study was set to determine was those who had received coaching versus those who had not received coaching, and the differences mostly in how burnout showed up in them. Now, I'm not going to say that the people who received coaching did not potentially suffer from burnout or had moments where they felt burned out. And nor would I say that they were not susceptible to it. There are many, many factors that influence burnout. But what I found, so I did both a quantitative and a qualitative methodology. So on the quantitative side, I administered a psychometric called the EQI 2.0, which is a valid and very reliable um, a test or an assessment that looks at 15 competencies. There's 5 subscales and 15 competencies in this scale. And what it looks at is things like, I'm not going to go through all 15, but it looks like stress management, interpersonal relationships, emotional expression, uh, optimism, um, what was the other one that was consistent across? Oh, social responsibility. Is those two, optimism and social responsibility, were very important in this study and stood out significantly. So that was the quantitative side. And then on the qualitative side, I did a survey with everyone, which sort of emulated the one-on-one interviews. Everybody got an interview, and then also a survey that they could answer sort of independently. Because, as a researcher as well, there are influences at work when you're interviewing people as well, right? It's the researchy likability and all of that can affect things. So
Yep.
having a separate survey to correlate to their answers was really critical. So
Interesting.
yeah.
Interesting. So you had people um, who had received coaching, um,
Hmm.
prior coaching from somebody else, right?
Yes.
And people who did not. So you had two cohorts, and then you administered these different surveys on them.
Yeah.
And was the idea then to compare? You wanted to compare the scores
Yeah.
from what they filled out, and as well as the analyze the qualitative um, results as well. Very
Correct. Yeah.
interesting. And so can you tell us about some of the findings? Like,
Yeah.
what did you find out when we compare the two groups? Are there some key insights that you could share with people?
Yeah. So on the EQI results, it was quite, I mean, I wasn't all that surprised, but at the same time, it was very evident what the differences were. So the coached group scored significantly higher in terms of the qualities, again, of the competency areas. So overall, and I mean, there were a couple of people in the coach group that, had lower scores. And the thing about the EQI is it's really not about higher or lower scores. It's not like, haha, we're the winners and you're not. It's really more about where their elevated levels of competency, uh, yeah, elevated numbers, I guess you could say, about their competencies. And so the coached group by default had lower levels of the competencies in the EQI results. And so that didn't surprise me because that was the hypothesis, right? That people who had received coaching really had built up strengths. And again, you can't make that correlation either. It may also be affected by the workplace, the culture, the tools at their disposal, the resources at their disposal. It could have just been luck. Who knows? But there was a difference. I want to say that coaching did have an impact because when I got to the point where I was also doing the interviews with people, the non-coached group really revealed a lot of um, sort of negative comments. Let's put it that way, right? Some people were, on the verge of quitting their jobs. They were frustrated with their management. They were frustrated with the resources at their disposal. Um, so it was telling from that regard. But the things that stood out. So here were the common threads amongst all the folks was when you looked at the EQI data, everybody across the board scored highest in social responsibility, which was absolutely no surprise. These people are dedicated. They have a very strong sense of duty to their roles, and they got into this job because of that. Um, some people also fall into their jobs, right? We trickle along and we go, oh, there's a good job. Oh, there's a higher pay. But overall, I would say most people who work in cybersecurity have a very strong social responsibility. And so that didn't surprise me at all. But then when you apply it into a workplace, and I've written about this and I've also posted videos on LinkedIn about it, is when you have those people working for you, are you taking advantage of that? Right. And it's easy to take advantage of that because people who have high social responsibility will probably sacrifice a lot of their own personal needs because of that,
Mhm.
that strong pull towards taking care of others. And so, do they have strong boundaries? Are they able to turn it off when they are able? Do they get enough rest? Are they eating properly? Are they level setting and resetting after an incident at work? Are they taking that time? And, again, it's a double-edged sword with that. The other outlier number was low in optimism. Also, not a surprise to me, because when you're working with threat actors and nation states are not with, against these folks all the time in your life, your work life, yeah, naturally your optimism's going to be low because you're dealing with the bad people all the time, right? You're under attack all the time. So naturally, I can imagine optimism would be quite low. So, yeah,
Interesting.
the EQI
Um,
was
I,
really telling. It said so much.
I
Sorry.
would also I would correlate your finding on the um on their social responsibility with another well-being survey that we conducted, which
Oh,
measured character and virtue. So a lot of these people do score high on those aspects. And one of the questions in that had to do with something along the lines of delayed gratification. I'm able to put away feeling happy now for happiness later, or something like that, which I feel sort of goes along the lines of what you just said, where they sort of take on work or responsibility today in the hope that
yeah,
maybe tomorrow they're going to have some time um, to recover.
yeah.
Um, what
When
I
you
also noticed,
Sorry, I
yes,
just wanted to add to that, this sacrificial behavior is critical to pay attention to for organizational leaders, right? That's the
yeah,
thing. And, again, you can pat yourself on the back and say, oh, we attracted all of these really high performing, um, sacrificial people. But again, check yourself. Are you taking advantage of that as an organizational leader? Are you, overlooking the need to say to people, you need to take some time off, you need to take some rest. I don't want you working over your vacation. I don't want you checking your email, and really being deliberate and intentional about that with the people who are protecting your organization. Anyway, sorry, off the soapbox.
absolutely.
Back to
That's
you.
that's actually no, that's such an important point, and I would also it, it's it's kind of hard, I would say, to implement, because that kind of behavior has to be modeled. If the
Yes.
leader itself is, working after hours over the weekend, because I think that's also something that the Nominate study mentioned. A
Hmm.
lot of the CISOs who were interviewed are working off hours. They're like with their partner, and the partner is saying, hey, I don't like it that you're still working right now. Get off your phone or stop checking email or responding to things. And some of them, it's also hard because some of the nature of the work for some of these people, like incident responders, you don't know when an attacker is going to come, and there's going to be an incident. So they might be with their kids playing in the playground, and then all of a sudden they got to go. It's
Yeah,
it's really hard, and I completely agree. These kind of behaviors can, or personalities might also be an advantage, but they shouldn't be exploited. And
exactly.
the organizations need to be aware of this and have measures in place to
Yeah,
balance it out so that
yeah,
this isn't exploited as well.
agreed. Yeah,
Um, on the EQI to that instrument, I also noticed from some of the scores that stress management, like the
mhm,
biggest difference had to do also with respect to stress management. Do you
yeah.
have any theories on why the people, like, what is it about coaching that helps people manage stress maybe better compared to people who don't receive coaching?
Yeah. Well, and that's multifactorial as well. I think, the thing that coaching does is it's not meant to be it's unfortunate word too is coaching, because I've been in sessions where people expect me to tell them what to do, and that's really not what coaches do,
No.
executive coaches. What we do is we become thinking partners with the client or the team. And what it is it's problem solving. And so when we, as humans, this is my experience, my opinion only. This is not theoretical, but when we have options in front of us or we have a pathway to solving a problem, we have a tendency to reduce our stress. And I think that's the thing that stresses us out is, how do I escape from this, or how do I solve this problem? And I don't know. There's too many things coming at me. And so stress management and coaching go hand in hand. Coaching is really about centering your thoughts, bringing, what could be a massive problem into something that, you know, creates almost like a framework, a pattern to solve the problem. More critically, though, is that it's the individual who's coming up with the solution. So I don't get on a call with a client and tell them what to do. I help them and step them through solving the problem, because what we do know about that kind of exchange, or I would say therapeutic container, even though this isn't therapy, um, is that when people come up with solutions themselves, they're more likely to execute, right? If I
Absolutely.
tell you what to do, you might agree with it, you might execute it, but if you come up with it, you're more likely to proceed and solve the problem. You're more likely to change and shift your belief system as well when you come up with the solution. And that's just neuroplasticity. That's rewiring your brain. We're here to reframe the problem and look at options and ways to solve it.
Yeah. Yeah. Amazing. I think what you just said is it's so important. And I feel like it would have helped to have actually defined what coaching is earlier on. So thank you for clarifying what it is, because I think the term coaching is used so generally, like we think of
Yeah.
like a soccer coach or something, and then they just tell us what to do. That's just consulting. That's
Yeah.
giving you the solution, right? Coaching is this partnership where you as a coach, you help guide your client figure out the solution and not
Yeah.
just give them the solution.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think stress management is also it's about regulating our nervous system. So somehow
Mm.
through coaching, they're able to actually regulate themselves and find the solution. I really like what you said over there.
Yeah. Thank you.
Um,
I was just gonna, if I could add one more
yeah,
thing.
go.
I mentioned the word a therapeutic container, and I gave myself permission to say that because recently I had a conversation with a psychiatrist. And there's always that, okay, are you getting into our area? Are you getting into psychology and psychiatric care? And it's like, no, because I mean, some people do go down that road, and by nature of being a certified coach, we know we're not supposed to go there, right? But there are psychological aspects. The psychiatrist I was speaking with, the way I described coaching to him, he came back and said, that's a therapeutic container. I'm not providing therapy, but what coaching is meant to be is a trusted area, judgment-free zone where people can be themselves. They can talk about all the things that are bothering them. And I will tell you, it, across the board, I think I've coached 150 people so far over my career, maybe more. I don't even know anymore. But what I will say to you is that every single person will say to me, I cannot talk to my family about this. I cannot talk to my boss about this. I have no one to talk to. And they're not at a point yet where they do need psychological help. They might be. And if they are, my job is to encourage them to seek out psychiatric, psychological help. Absolutely. I will cut the relationship off. But if we're talking about workplace and we're talking about problem solving and future forward behaviors, that's where coaching can really, really help people.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, thanks. Thanks for sharing that. Um, Let's see. We touched upon stress management as being one of the areas
Yeah.
that we saw some differences between coached and not coached groups. You mentioned what was social responsibility? No, social responsibility was not one of the difference. Were there other differences that you saw? I think I have over here something like self-perception and self-expression
Yeah.
as one of the aspects. Were there any other aspects that you'd like to highlight between the two
Mm.
groups?
Well, some of the aspects of the differences again were probably in the one-on-one interviews, and again, it wasn't mutually exclusive in all cases. But what I did notice was that those who had not received coaching probably framed things a little more negatively, right?
Interesting. Yeah.
And again, it was sort of, but then I worried about demand characteristics. And that's another aspect of doing a study, right? And I had wondered about, oh gosh, were people negative because of the title of the study, right? Because it was just, if you hadn't received coaching, well, naturally, there's the whole lacking or missing out on part. And so,
Mhm.
was that framing people's answers in a negative way? Because I didn't get coaching, so I'm losing out on something here, right?
Mm,
They knew I was comparing the groups. So that could have been an effect. But assuming, people came as a blank slate in some ways, um, you know, the challenge is well, it wasn't a challenge. It was sort of again, the answers that came through seemingly, in my opinion, felt more negative, felt more um, again, emotional expression. Some people were quite expressive about, working in a frenetic environment, lack of tools, lack of support, lack of availability to reset after an incident, or not being equipped to do their jobs correctly. That came out a lot, and that was one of the factors in the survey and in the questionnaire, and when I did my interviews, was, do you feel equipped to do your job? And many came back and said, no, I don't. And what is that? Is that tools and technology, or is that also availability to social or cognitive support or emotional support? So
mm.
that was
Can you say
critical.
more about that? So when they feel they're not equipped, what
Mm.
was there like? Did they say what they want, perhaps, or do you have any thoughts on what's missing over there, or what could be the challenge?
Well, what led to that was, okay, well, do you have, I cannot comment nor ask too many questions about the technological support or the human resources in your organization, but what about emotional and cognitive support? And many people who worked in large organizations definitely had access to employee assistance programs or EAPs. But when asked further about whether they engaged in them, a lot of them said, I can't remember the number, but many of them said, EAP, I don't want to talk to somebody on the other end of the phone who knows absolutely nothing about what I do. I want
Uh-huh.
to be able
Uh-huh.
to speak with somebody who is understanding, or at least gets that, I work in an environment where I've got to make some pretty crazy decisions, or not rash decisions, but I have to make important decisions, and I don't know if I'm making the right decisions. And that, you know, or that I work a department within an organization where we don't have enough people. And that's why we're not getting enough sleep. And that's why we're missing all of our holidays and our kids' birthday parties. I want to talk to somebody who understands that. So an EAP, a generic run of the mill EAP, in the opinion of the people in my study, was useless to them. They really needed customized, tailored solutions to help take care of their minds and take care of their hearts and their emotions. And so that was Like, that was a really important discussion for a lot of people, just not having that, having it available to them, I guess, is the point I'm trying to make, right?
I see. I see. Yeah, interesting. What about so it seems like I would sort of look at this as a lack of trust then with the EAP
Yeah,
offerings or the people who are behind those services.
yeah,
Um, yeah, that's actually interesting. Um,
totally.
so maybe we can sort of switch gears a bit, and perhaps you could highlight some of the challenges, or were there actually any challenges that you encountered during the study, and how did you overcome them if you had any?
Well, coordinating, I'm sure you can relate to this. Coordinating interviews with people who are extremely busy can be challenging at times. Um, so many interviews had to be rescheduled, and that was a bit tough. But again, I take this with a light heart, knowing that these people are very busy, and they're just, they might get taken away by something going on in the organization. So that was a challenge. Um, the other part was, I think I probably had too many questions in the interview. Um, I'd set aside an hour to interview people, and in some cases I felt like, oh my gosh, I could have asked so many more questions. So the volume of data that came through was significant. Um, and then, when you go to write your thesis, you got to choose, right? So that, I would probably say, was the toughest part. And it's not a PhD study. So I think, if I were to ever go on and do a PhD, which I think I might do,
Yes,
I would
please.
certainly plan it a little differently. I still am very proud. Like, it wasn't horrible, and I did it over the course of a year. So I really gave myself the space to do it. But I think if anyone's out there doing a study or just starting a study, you will know that you've got to plan your time very carefully. And yeah, I would say that that was the tough part. In terms of the research and correlating, the literature review portion, that was pretty good because, again, it was a combination of looking at some of the theoretical models around burnout and resilience, which are very well established and very well studied. Coaching is very well studied as well. And I mean, it's still a relatively new, quote unquote, social science, but there is a body of work that's growing in the area of the impact of coaching. So that was very helpful. And then, of course, there's a lot of study on cybersecurity. And again, the human factor side is light by comparison to other areas, but
Yeah,
we have some solid researchers in this area who are looking, and again, at the mental health of cybersecurity professionals. And this is it's kind of one of those things where I forget what this is called, but you tell somebody not to think about a white car, and then all of a sudden they're driving down
all
the
the
road and all you see is white cars, right?
mm-hmm. Yes,
Well, it's the
yes,
same thing with this. Suddenly I'm meeting people like you, and I'm meeting more people who actually are out there who are very interested in protecting the hearts and minds and emotions of these wonderful people who are taking care of us. And I worry that they're a forgotten group. And that's a personal thing. One of my core values is safety. And that's not just my safety, that's everybody else's safety. And when I said this was an existential question, it was for me. As if somebody is suffering in silence because, oh, it's just computers. Oh, it's just code. No, it's not. These people are sacrificing themselves to take care of us. And I think we have a duty of service to take care of them.
absolutely. I really love that last part. That's very touching, and I think that might also, at least if I think of it, that might also reflect why and why there's dimension and connection with the Maslow's hierarchy as well, right? With the need for safety, it's just like in our human nature, and um, I think it's so important to think of giving back and to be aware that there are people who are actually giving their lives, serving us and protecting us, and that we are aware of this and are doing our duty to give back to them in some form or the other. So
Yeah.
that's really nice.
Thank you. You know, one of the things that I found out when I was starting the study was here in Canada, where I live, we have public policy around um, the protection of public safety workers, like first responders, military, um, emergency services people, because they are exposed to trauma all the time.
Yeah.
So it's at the municipal level or the jurisdictional level where they work that, it is the responsibility of the regional area or the municipality to offer some kind of psychological support to police officers, fire, emergency. But we don't look at cybersecurity professionals in the same way. And I wonder if it is because, oh, it's just, again, computers and software. Well, I think we need to change that belief because
Hmm.
they are also traumatized. I know people that work in the field who have been threatened. They've had their family members threatened because they are trying to protect against the bad guys. And so the bad guys will threaten them in hopes of getting them to back down. So imagine that alone, just being under some kind of physical threat or some other kind of threat from people in another part of the world that could actually do damage to you. That's traumatizing. And trauma is a word that gets thrown around a lot these days. I know that. But when you believe that your safety is in jeopardy as an individual, as a cybersecurity professional, that will have an effect on you. That will have an effect on your thinking, on your processing, on your emotional regulation. And yet you're in the role that you are, destined to do to take care of an organization, yet you may be under threat. So, whether it's coaching, whether it's psychiatric or psychological help or any kind of therapy, just offering it to them, I think we are behooved to do it, right? Help them.
Amazing. Um, are there any other aspects that you would like organizations to take action on? Like I think what you just mentioned is, this sense of duty that we should have. Other things that let's say leaders could do right
Yeah.
now based on what you uncovered, and also perhaps individuals as well to, take care of their mental health.
Yeah. Well, I think well, organizations, let's start with that at the organizational level. You know, eh, there's so many types of organizations. Some have boards of directors, some don't. Um, Organizational leaders, I think, need to pay attention to who's working in their cybersecurity team or who's managing their cybersecurity and realize again that these people have a very strong duty of service and a high social responsibility. So, check again, I mentioned this earlier in the call, check your exploitive nature of that, right?
Mhm.
It's a great thing to have these people, but also remember that they may have to be told to take time away. Um, I think we also could systematize this a little bit, where if there is the high potential for an incident, is there a protocol that could be developed within the organization where, you're building those resiliency strategies, whether it's through coaching or something else, but, making sure that people have an emotional outlet to talk about things, whether it's as a team coaching, or even just team meetings. in making sure that people have an opportunity to talk about the things that are really troubling them in the workplace. And I'm not talking about employee engagement surveys, by the way. Those are important. I don't dismiss them, but those are usually done once every 6 months or once a year. And that means nothing in the field when you're working from a day-to-day perspective. So building in sort of the checkpoints where people are checked upon. Are you okay? Do you need support? What can we do to help you? That's critical. On the opposite side of boom, on the right of boom, is there a protocol? And I look to the NIST frameworks on incident response. Could there be another element there for human factors, right? We do this in emergency rooms. We have critical incident debriefs. We have critical incident protocols in emergency rooms and in other areas. Aviation, you mentioned, policing. That is a common practice where after the incident, are we taking care of people's psychological state and giving them an opportunity to talk about it, not forcing them to talk about it, because some people just process internally and that's okay. But are we setting up those conditions for people to discuss what they felt, how they're feeling now, how will they move forward? And sometimes just sitting together after something major happens and talking about how they feel in a safe place gives them that ability to process things and move on, right? And get past it. Because that's the other thing. If something terrible happens and you don't process it, you're carrying it with you all the way. And it will always be there. It's like a scar. Once you've gone through
Yeah.
something terrible, it's a scar you carry. But are you allowing that scar to actually form, right? If people go through a critical incident and they don't get to process it, that wound metaphorically is still open. And that will impact everything. We know from burnout that exhaustion, cynicism, and self-efficacy are the three core areas, right? And so if people are exhausted mentally, physically, whatever that may be, they're not going to process properly. They're not going to make good decisions necessarily. They're not going to move forward with joy and happiness in the workplace, right? So
Yeah.
it can affect the retention as well. There's so many
Yeah.
things that can be affected.
hmm Yeah. Speaking of retention, I was curious, um, because sort of connecting with, again, that first study that you mentioned from Nominet,
Yeah.
um, about the churn rate. Did you have a chance to follow up with the participants? Like, did the people who the so you had two cohorts or two groups,
Yeah.
right? The people
Yeah.
who received coaching and the people who had not received coaching.
Mhm.
Did the people who receive coaching continue to work in the organization? And the ones who didn't, did they leave? Do you have any um, thoughts on that?
Yeah.
Or
I don't know if they left, but, some people in the study certainly had, I had asked them, how many times they had changed jobs over their career. That was more the interest. And I would say, well, it was a bit of a mixed bag. But again, remember that the span of work experience was so big, so that
Mhm.
that impacted
Yeah.
things. I again should have paid attention to that a little more. I would say, though, that the people who had received coaching in general, I'm generalizing, were happier in their workplace and more satisfied and more willing to stay. But all of them were looking for career advancement. So that's the good
Okay.
news, is that they weren't planning to leave the industry altogether. Were they planning to leave their employer? Some of them definitely were planning to leave their employer. Definitely. Others wanted
Okay.
to make a go of it and really wanted to make it work because maybe they had the conditions of success around them. They had a supportive management team. They had a supportive board. They had the tools they needed. They might have been lacking some of the individuals in certain roles on their team, but they were okay with that because there was an effort being put in to hiring people or bringing on the resources they needed. So that was critical. Um, but when you think about retention, if you've got somebody, let me put it this way. We talk about fight, flight, and freeze, right? If you are burning out, most people just want to escape, right? When you're burning out, you're not sleeping, you're not eating properly, you're missing out on life. Most people just want to run away from that. I
Mhm.
don't I don't know anyone that wants to lean into burnout, right? So, I think back to the whole, the message to leaders is pay attention to this. They are not just a couple of computer geeks working in a department. They are multitasking. They are trying to do a million things at once and protect the organization. And when boom happens, all of a sudden, all eyes are on them, right?
Yeah.
That's the other part that came up in the study was, they get ignored. They get, not they, in general, sorry. Um, you know, Everything is great until it isn't. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, all eyes on you. Well, look, how many weeks and months and years have I kept this organization safe and now something happens? I've been telling you that we don't have enough people, we don't have the right tools or whatever. And now we get a breach and either I'm a hero or I'm a pariah and I'm kicked out, right?
Yeah, that's pretty rough. Yeah, yeah. Job insecurity, being a scapegoat, lack of recognition.
Yeah.
In some sense, it's this they lose hope, or there's this feeling of lack of autonomy because even though they ask for things, they don't get the resources that they need or the support that they need. It's definitely indeed quite difficult.
Yeah.
Um, are there any aspects of your work that you would like to have more research done? So if we think
Oof.
forward, what could be done? Why would you want to go about doing that?
Why would I want to go about doing it? Well, we all want second chances at things, right? I learned so much from this study. I, you know, there were so many things that came up that were, oh, I should have done that, or I could have done that, or why wouldn't I have done that? But again, you only have a certain amount of time. I think if I could do this study differently, I would do it again for sure. I would change the parameters, as I mentioned, in terms of paying attention to length of time in the job. I also might have done a gender study because one of the things we know is we still don't have enough women in cybersecurity for a reason, perhaps. Um, I might have measured that, but what I think I would love to do is more of a longitudinal study where I actually see the difference between this time people who haven't been coached and follow them along where they are receiving coaching and then measure the difference
Yeah.
after. I think
Yes.
that would be a
Yes.
really interesting thing to do. The other thing that I would love to do is focus on again those sort of organizational protocols and maybe work with an organization that doesn't have a protocol, but actually implements one and then measure the protocol for people post, maybe, a year or two later
Yeah. Yeah.
and see if that makes an impact, right? Check out whether you have something, especially during an incident, implement a strategy around taking care of the human factors part of it and doing some kind of intervention, some kind of critical incident intervention for the people and see if there's a change in their behaviors, their retention. Again, these are longitudinal studies. So
Mhm.
got
Yeah.
to have
Yeah.
the money
Amazing.
and the time to do it.
I like the sound of that. I feel like it's also the reason I also ask you this question is that in the hope that it also inspires other people to start thinking along these lines and
Yeah.
work together either with us, with you, um, or even start their own research direction and sort of
Mhm.
make change collectively. And it's not possible that just a few of us do it. We need a lot of people to go about doing this,
Yeah.
within organizations, from academia, get the funding.
Yeah.
And I think it would actually make a very meaningful impact. Yeah.
I was just going to add one more thing. I don't know if you want to keep this as part of the final edit, but there's another group of researchers that have applied what's called the dirty dozen of aviation to cybersecurity mental health awareness. I don't know if you've heard of this. Have you heard
No,
of it?
tell me about it.
So the Dirty Dozen was actually developed by a Canadian, yay, go Canada,
Yeah.
who worked at Transport Canada. And it is a protocol. It's a 12 factor scale that is used in aviation, particularly in aircraft maintenance. But I think they use it for other areas now. And it was developed to look at patterns of communication and how people. It's like a checklist, right? How are people communicating? How are they getting along? How are they working together? I can't remember the 12, but it's a fascinating framework to look at, what are those factors that lead to an incident? So in aviation, if the people who are taking care of the airplane are not working well together and they are assuming somebody else is doing the job, that, attaching a bolt, an important bolt to a plane, right? There's
Yeah.
that's critical to the safety of human beings. So I forget who the researchers are at the moment, but that to me gives a lot of promise as, again, a framework that organizations might be able to use in determining how is their cybersecurity team performing together. And again, it's not just the individual, it's what is going on. What are the dynamics at work that are causing the burnout, that are causing or even supporting resilience? What are those things that are allowing people to perform in the most frenetic environments with all the things they have to think about? It's not just protecting the organization, it's also about knowing the regulations, and if the business is compliant, right?
Yeah.
Think about all the things that have to swirl around in the heads of a CISO to make sure that the organization is safe. So anyway, I love the idea of the dirty dozen and overlaying it into a cybersecurity organization, just to see how people are operating together and apart, right?
Interesting. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Um, so we're slowly coming to the end of our recording.
Thank you.
Are there any last words you'd like to share with the people who would be watching or listening to
Oh,
this?
well, if you're a cybersecurity professional, just know that there are people out here like us who really want to help, and we care. And there's a growing group of researchers and business people who really want to see that you are psychologically and emotionally safe. Um, and for those who are business leaders, I ask that you take note of, what can you do, to help your cybersecurity teams. They are almost like first responders, and hopefully you have enough power in your organization to make changes and continue to change and continue to listen and provide the cybersecurity team with tailored solutions so that they're not only doing the technical work, but they are doing the emotional and cognitive work to continue to work well for you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Catherine, for being here today. It was really fascinating and very insightful
Thank
to
you.
hear about your research and all the things that you had to share with us.
Thank you. It was such a pleasure to be here, and I'm so happy you and I have met.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right.
Thanks for listening to Mental Health and Cybersecurity, What the Research Reveals. I'm Dr. Kashyap Timaraju. And if you found this conversation valuable, please share it with a colleague or friend and join me in raising awareness about the people behind our digital security. Together, we can help strengthen the resilience and well-being of cybersecurity professionals everywhere. Thank you.